Abyssal Mask has always been a strong item, but since Riot began its assault on ADCs after their invasion into every lane, it's suddenly become the single most valuable item in the game mathematically. And we're here to explain how a magic resist item is set to conquer the ADC meta and why you should be building it on almost every champion. So let's get started. On the warpath to removing non-bot lane ADCs, Riot ended up buffing mages to make them more appealing. So they nerfed Merc Treads to reduce the early game mage counterplay, and just recently buffed a whole bunch of mages and their items. And don't get me wrong, ADCs being the best pick in every single lane is a problem, but the way Riot's gone about fixing it is just completely wrong. Their biggest error is assuming that only ADCs can play bot lane. So if you nerf all their key items over a couple of patches, they can't play in mid or top. And since no one else can take their place, they'll just scuttle back to bot lane with their tails between their legs, and all will be as it was. Except that's just categorically incorrect. The thing that led us to this point was the massive ADC item buff in the mid-season and the introduction of Absorb Life as a rune they can use, which meant that ADCs could take D-Blade, Fleet Footwork, and Absorb Life and sustain against almost all damage done by mages in lane. So Tristana and Corki started dominating mid, Lucian moved up as a counter to Corki, and Zeri got promoted once the Tristana nerfs came through. But none of that is because mages were weak, but because ADCs just became overwhelmingly strong. What everyone seems to forget is that mage items also got an enormous buff in the mid-season, so much so that they've always been dominating the bot lane win rates in the background, and that's because their first item power spikes have always been better than ADCs, and now they've just been nerfed, that's even more true. The only thing that ADCs had going for them before was a stronger early game because of Doran's Blade, which also just got nerfed. So mages are objectively better bot laners than ADCs are, and Riot's attempts to squash the ADC infestation has worked so well that ADCs are worse off in almost every single lane, including bot lane, which is why basically every single one of the highest win rate bot laners in Emerald Plus today is still a mage. The irony here is that this probably won't remove ADCs from mid and top because the initial reason they could play in those lanes has only been partially addressed, and instead the nerfs morph them into a counter pick rather than a first pick, which neither eliminates them in those lanes nor pushes them back bot. Ultimately, this will probably shift the damage landscape across Summoner's Rift away from the attack damage those ADCs were dishing out and further toward the magic damage that mages can now unleash unpunished. And an AP-based economy increases the value of two very specific things: magic resist and magic penetration, which are the exact stats Abyssal provides. But what makes it such a valuable item is how it reduces magic resist. Void Staff and Crypt Balloon only apply their magic penetration to champions you deal damage to, and they ignore their magic resist rather than reducing it, so it also only applies on your damage. But Abyssal Mask essentially deletes a portion of the enemy's MR in an area around you bigger than any auto-attack range League of Legends has to offer, which technically makes it the most valuable item in the game. Because reduction and penetration basically do the same thing to the enemy, we can comfortably say that you standing in range of the enemy team is the same as every single one of your allies having a Crypt Bloom. And since we know how much gold 30% magic pen is worth, its passive alone could technically be equal to almost 7,000 gold, putting its potential gold efficiency through the roof. But the best part is almost anyone can build it. The most obvious candidates are tanks who can buy it to buff their team's damage in the process of making themselves more tanky, but at this point it can genuinely be built as a full damage item. It doesn't really work on high range mages like Lux or Xerath because their range is so high they won't often be close enough to get the passive off anyway, and their range is what keeps them safe to begin with, so they don't really need the health or MR. But for low range mages, it's honestly a better option than magic pen items half of the time. Whenever battle mages trade, they almost always take return fire, because their low range kits mean they need to get close to their targets to deal damage and often need multiple spell rotations to kill them. So they're always going to make use of Abyssal's passive and can get more spell rotations off because they're tankier. The most on-the-nose example would be Swain, whose highest win rate core has included Abyssal Mask for the last 3 patches, but champions like Silas, whose heal just got an HP scaling added to it, also get double value out of it, and Riftwalker's massively high base damage means Kassadin doesn't suffer building it either. One of the more situational uses would be Katarina. Unlike most other battle mages, her kit's kind of built around one-shotting people and getting resets, but if she's against a tankier team, she can't really rely on getting her resets off, which means she'll need to get in more spell rotations, and Abyssal gives her the MR reduction and survivability to do that. The last obvious battle mage is Mordekaiser, and he comfortably bridges us into tanks at the same time. Mordekaiser's entire kit is about being close to people and surviving, but what really makes him an exceptional abuser is the max health damage on his passive. Champions with max HP scalings technically have some of the highest damage outputs in the game, because it scales with the enemy's HP. So the longer the game goes on, the stronger those spells become, because every champion in the game gets HP per level. So for champs whose max HP spells deal magic damage, Abyssal's MR Shred makes them even more effective, which is why both Amumu and Zack's highest win rate item is Abyssal Mask. The same is also true for all tank items that deal magic damage, like both Barmy's items and Thornmail, but the best item synergy for it is Unending Despair, since the heal you get is based on the magic damage it deals. Udyr also uses it really well with the max HP damage on Wingborne Storm, but in high elo, move speed items technically have a better win rate because people in Diamond Plus know how to abuse movement speed better than the average player. Cho'Gath is another situational pick. Currently, his best build starts with a Warmogs and a Trinity Force, so it makes the most sense to build Jak'Sho third because it gives him both armor and magic resist. But if you're going the traditional tank Cho build, Abyssal Mask is still by far the best third item for him. The last champion who can really abuse this item is Rumble, who can almost reduce a champion's MR to 0 using it. For some strange reason, percentage MR reduction works additively, so if Rumble reduces someone's MR using his E at max rank, the 30% reduction Abyssal has gets added on top of that, rather than taking 30% of the newly reduced number, which makes no sense. So once he has enough ability haste to hit 3 E's consecutively, Abyssal's added reduction means he reduces a target's MR by 84%, which is completely absurd. The only other thing to touch on is when to build it. Abyssal Mask is almost exclusively a third item for every champion who can properly make use of it. Percentage-based anything is more impactful in the later stages of the game, because at the beginning, champions just don't have enough of the stat you're reducing for it to be as effective as raw damage. And because people don't have a lot of damage in the early game, tanks are better off building HP first and second item, simply because it's cheaper to build and it keeps you alive against all damage types. So because Abyssal's not got that much HP on it, it's again better as a third item. And that's pretty much it. Just as a disclaimer, we don't actually know if that's what Riot really thinks about ADCs. That's just how it looks based on the changes they've made, and we understand that they have a super difficult job trying to please everyone, and that ultimately changes like this keep the game fresh and exciting, whether they're intended or not. So your focus hopefully shouldn't be on the changes they've made, but more on how you can abuse this new landscape to your benefit and rake in them LP stonks. So until next time, good luck and have fun.